So, shalom, shalom, Yotam. Abba told me that you really liked the story that I was reading, and me and Grandma are very happy about that. And we will continue to read you the story. I think Grandma will take a turn as well. And one of the interesting things is, you know how I told you that when I make up a story, I don't know necessarily what's coming next. Well, I haven't read this book before, so I don't know what's coming next in the book either. So it's sort of fun for me as well as for you. But I'm really pleased that you are enjoying it. In order to talk to you, I have to look at the camera, which is right at the top of the screen, above the screen. But I tend sometimes, to look down at myself, like now. So I'm not really looking at you. I'm looking at my picture. I'll try to remember to talk directly to you. But when I do that, I can't see myself. So it's a little weird. Anyway, let's see. I wanted to tell you that I miss you, and that I've been walking every day, because I have diabetes and I have to keep exercising. I just came back from a walk, and I take Danny with me. So I feel sometimes when I'm walking that I'm doing what you do, which is running back and forth in the house, because I do the same walk every day. I walk basically up to the snake house and then back again. And I actually go up and down the hill to the snake house twice, so that make it a longer and harder walk. And the other thing I wanted to tell you is I'll send you a picture, but Grandma took a picture of you and me cutting down the mulberry tree, which is a very, very good picture. And the mulberry tree that we cut has started to sprout little leaves. So I'm going to send you a picture of that. Even though it's late in the year, things grow more in the springtime rather than in the fall or the winter. It already has little leaves, and I'll send you a picture of that. So, without further ado, as they say, I will continue the story. But I want to remind you of what's it about. That is, Rashid, Harun's father, is unhappy because his wife Soraya ran away with Mr. Sengupta, or whatever his name is, and so he's not feeling very happy, but he's trying to act happy. And he was hired by some politicos. You remember those are people who are politicians and running for offices, like for the Knesset. They hire him to tell stories because he's so popular that whoever gets him to tell stories is likely to get elected. And he's been hired, and he took a railroad train with Sharon to go to a place where he's going to tell the stories. And he's just finished talking about the Dole Lake, Dole meaning boring, the boring lake. And he's trying to make it sound interesting, but it's hard because he doesn't really feel very excited. So that's where we're at, and I believe they're on the train. And right, they're looking out the window of the railroad carriage without talking. Rashid, the father, is not talking, and it picks up from there. So they were met at the railway station of the town of G by two unsmiling men wearing gigantic mustachios and loud yellow check pants. They look like villains. That means bad guys. To me, Sharon thought, but he kept his opinion to himself. The two men drove Rashid and Sharon straight to the political rally. They drove past buses that dripped people, in other words, people dropping off, like a sponge drips water, and arrived at a thick forest of human beings, a crowd of people sprouting in all directions, like leaves on jungle trees. There were great bushes of children and rows of ladies arranged in lines, like flowers in a gigantic flower bed. Rashid was deep in his own thoughts and was nodding sadly to himself. Then the thing happened, the unthinkable thing. Rashid went out on the stage in front of that vast jungle of a crowd, and Harun watched him from the wings, and the poor storyteller opened his mouth, and the crowd squealed in excitement. And now Rashid Khalifa, standing there with his mouth hanging open, found that it was as empty as his heart. That's all that came out. The Shah of Blah sounded like a stupid cow. Ark! 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 That's all that came out. After that, they were shut up in a steaming hot office, while the two men with mustachios and loud yellow check pants shouted at Rashid and accused him of having taken a bribe from their rivals and suggested they might cut off his tongue and other items too. And Rashid, close to tears, kept repeating that he couldn't understand why he had dried up and promising to make it up to them. In the Valley of K, I will be terrifico, magnifico, he vowed. Better you are, the mustachios men shouted back, or else out comes that tongue from your lying throat. So when does the plane leave for K? Haroun butted in, hoping to calm things down. The train, he knew, didn't go into the mountains. The shouting men began to shout even more loudly. Plane? Plane? His papa stories won't take off, and the brat wants to fly. No plane for you, Mister and Sonny. Catch a blasted bus. My fault again, Haroun thought wretchedly, unhappily. I started all this off. What's the use of stories that aren't even true? I asked that question, and it broke my father's heart. So it's up to me to put things right. Something has to be done. The only trouble was he couldn't think of a single thing. The two shouting men, though this chapter is called The Mail Coach. Mail as in you're getting letters. The two shouting men shoved Rashid and Haroun into the back seat of a beaten-up car with torn scarlet red seats. Scarlet is red. And even though the car's cheap radio was playing movie music at top volume, the shouting men went on shouting about the unreliability of storytellers all the way to the rusted iron gates of the bus station. Here, Haroun and Rashid were dumped out of the car without ceremony or farewell. Expenses of the journey? Rashid hopefully inquired, but the shouting men shouted, More cash demands? Check, cheek, that means nerve, cheek, nerve of the chappie, and drove away. Chappie, I guess, means fellow, and drove away at high speed, forcing dogs and cows and women with baskets of fruit on their heads to dive out of the way. Loud music and rude words continued to pour out of the car as it zigzagged away into the distance. Rashid didn't even bother to shake his fist. Haroun followed him toward the ticket office across a dusty courtyard with walls covered in strange warnings. If you try to rush or zoom, you are sure to meet your doom. And was one of them. And all the dangerous overtakers end up safe at undertakers. Undertakers are the people that take care of your body after you die. That was another. And also, look out, slow down, don't be funny. Life is precious. Cars cost money. I guess that's people writing these things trying to be funny or interesting. There should be one about not shouting at the passengers in the back seat, Haroun muttered, thinking about those two mustachioed guys. And Rashid went in to buy a ticket. There was a wrestling match at the ticket window instead of a queue or a line, because everyone wanted to be first, and as most people were carrying chickens or children or other bulky items, the result was a free-for-all, out of which feathers and toys and dislodged, that means knocked off hats, kept flying. And from time to time, some dizzy fellow with ripped clothes would burst out of the melee. Melee means a bunch of people shoving and pushing each other, triumphantly waving a little scrap of paper, his ticket. Rashid, taking a deep breath, dived into the crowd. Meanwhile, in the courtyard of the buses, small dust clouds were rushing back and forth like little desert whirlwinds. Haroun realized that these clouds were full of human beings. There were simply too many passengers at the bus station to fit into the available buses. And anyhow, the bus, nobody knew which bus was leaving first, which made it possible for the drivers to play a mischievous game. One driver would start his engine, adjust his mirrors, and behave as he was about to leave. At once, a bunch of passengers would gather up their suitcases and bedrolls and parrots and transistor radios and rush toward him. But then he'd switch off his engine with a smile. Well, on the far side of the courtyard, a different bus would start up, and the passengers would start running to that bus all over again. It's not fair, Haroun said aloud. Correct, a booming voice behind him answered. But you'll have to admit, it's too much fun to watch. The owner of this voice turned out to be an enormous fellow with a great quiff, I guess that means a curl, of hair standing straight up on his head like a parrot's crest. His face, too, was extremely hairy, and the thought popped into Haroun's mind that all this hair was somehow rather feather-like. Ridiculous idea, he told himself. What on earth made me think of a thing like that? It's just plain nonsense. Nonsense, as anyone can see. Just then, two separate dust clouds of scurrying passengers collided in an explosion of umbrellas and milk churns. That's a thing where you churn milk to make butter. And rope sandals. And Haroun, without meaning to, began to laugh. You're a tip-top type, boomed the fellow with the feathery hair. You see the funny side. An accident is truly a sad and cruel thing. But, crash, wham, spatoosh, how it makes one giggle and hoot. Here the giant stood and bowed. At your service, he said. My good name is Butt, driver of the number 1 Super Express mail coach to the Valley of K. Haroun thought he should bow too. And my, as you say, my good name is Haroun. Then he had an idea and added, if you mean what you say at being at my service, then in fact there is something you can do. It was a figure of speech, in other words, not necessarily a real offer. Mr. Butt replied, but, I will stand by it. A figure of speech is a shifty thing. It can be twisted or it can be straight. But Butts is a straight man, not a twister. What's your wish, my good mister? Hey, that rhymes, twister and mister. Rashid had often told Haroun about the beauty of the road between the town of G to the Valley of K, a road that climbed like a serpent snake through the pass of H toward the tunnel of I, which was also known as the tunnel of J. There was snow by the roadside, and there were fabulous multicolored birds gliding in the gorges. The gorges are the space between the rocks. When the road emerged from the tunnel, Rashid told him, and when the traveler saw before him the most spectacular view on earth, a vista of the Valley of K with its golden fields and silver mountains, with the dull lake at its heart, a view spread out like a magic carpet, waiting for someone and take a ride. No man can be sad when he looks upon that sight, Rashid had said, but a blind man's blindness must feel twice as wretched then, because he can't see. So what Haroun asked Mr. Butt for was this: front row seats in the mail coach all the way to the Dull Lake, and a guarantee that the mail coach would pass through the tunnel of I, also known as J, before sunset, when the sun goes down, because otherwise the whole point would be lost. But, Mr. Butt protested, the hour is already late. Then, seeing Karun's face begin to fall, he grinned broadly and clapped his hands. But, so what? He shouted. The beautiful view, to cheer up the sad dad. He seems to rhyme things, doesn't he? Before sunset, no problem. So when Rashid staggered out of the ticket office, he found Harun waiting on the steps of the mail coach with the best seats reserved inside and the motor running. The other passengers, who were out of breath from their running back and forth to different buses, and were covered in dust with their sweat was combining with the dust to make mud, stared at Harun with a mixture of jealousy and awe. Rashid was impressed too. As I may have mentioned, young Harun Khalifa, more to you that meets the blinking eye. Yahoo! Yelled Mr. Butt, who was as excitable as any mail service employee. Vroom! He added, and jammed the accelerator right down against the floor. And the mail coach rocketed through the gates of the bus station, narrowly missing a wall on which Harun read this: If from speed you get your thrill, take precautions, make your will. A will is what you write as to what they should do with your money and all your property when you die. So speed is dangerous, is the point. Okay, I think I'll stop here and go and I'll make another recording after this as they leave on the bus. So, thank you for listening. Lots of love from Grandma and Grandpa, and I'll see you soon on the next chapter. So, shalom, shalom, bye-bye.